Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. It took a couple of false starts, so I'm incredibly excited today to have Udo Erasmus joining us on the show. And look, in a notional way, we're going to talk about oil, but realistically, we're going to talk about a whole lot more than oil. But I do want to start with something that, and I ask this not as a leading question, and not to put you on the spot, but I'm interested, Udo, how old are you? Because I want to use that to frame.
I will be 82 in May.
Wonderful. The reason I asked that question is, firstly, you're the oldest person we've had on the show. But the thing that I'm excited about with that is that I am fascinated by the amount of perspective that you have as a result of having been through 82 years on this planet. And we're going to get to some of your backstory later, and some of your not even backstory, more recent story, whatever you call that story. So we will get to that. But I just want to welcome you to the show. Just give us the 2-minute version of yourself firstly, and then we'll get straight into oils, and then we're going to go on from there.
Okay. So Udo Erasmus, I'm a war baby from the Second World War. I was born in Poland when it was part of Germany. My parents from Latvia. We lost everything in the war. Not everything. We had our clothes, we had our bodies, and we had our life, but we lost everything else. So I got stripped of all of the things that we take for granted. And that was an incredible gift because it made me look at basics. Right. And so I've always been into basics. I never felt so safe. So I was always trying to figure out how things worked. You know, as a little kid, I was doing experiments, always trying to figure out how do things work. Got into science to figure out how things work. Got into bioscience to figure out how creatures work. Got into psych to figure out how thinking works. Got into medicine for just a year because I was trying to figure out how health works, but it was only about disease. And the dean said, we don't know what health is. We're working on it. And we were also told that a doctor should always sound as though he knows what's going on, even when he doesn't. And that ended my medical career because we call that lying on the farm. Right. And interesting. I wasn't going to make my living lying to people about things I didn't know. That was just like, it didn't fit right. So I went back into biochemistry and genetics, and I was always looking for meaning of life, like what is a human being? Who am I? You know, how should I live? And so I went into some of the various world religions and scriptures and teachings of the masters. And then eventually I got married and we had 3 kids and my marriage broke up and I got a job as a pesticide sprayer because I wanted to kill something. I was so upset.
As in flying planes or?
No. I had a tractor with a big tank on the back, spraying lawn, spraying trees. I was doing everything. Right. And I didn't air spray though, no.
Right.
And then after 3 years of being really careless, I got poisoned, went to the doctor, said, what do you got for pesticide poisoning? She said, nothing. And that day, the penny dropped for me that my health is really my responsibility. Now, I wasn't a real junk food eater, but it really hit home. So I said, okay, how do I help myself? I got the background. So I went into the journals reading the science on food and health, nutrition and disease. Yeah. And ended up in the area of oils because it was so confusing. You know, on the one hand, I read a study that says omega-6 is an essential nutrient. You have to have it to live and be healthy. Right. And if you don't get enough, you die. And the very next study I read said omega-6 gives you cancer and kills you. And my head exploded. It was like, how can that be? I have to have it to be healthy and then it kills me.
Sure.
Right? It was that conflict, that contradiction. Trying to figure it out made me look deeper and look at how oils are made and how oils are used and what happens to the oils in terms of damage when they're made and when they're used. So most people won't tell you that. Most people don't tell you that because they didn't look deep enough. So then I got into oils and I developed methods for making oils with health in mind. Then I got into, said, well, what's next? Most neglected area, that's digestion. So I got into enzymes, probiotics, fiber, bitters. And then what's the next? Greens, did that. And then I started thinking, what else affects health? And when I thought about it, I said, hey, actually everything affects health. Oh my God. If I want to do total health, then I'm going to have to study nature and human nature. Mm. And so I'm now involved in creating a field of total health based on nature and human nature, and a teachable field of human nature, because we've been around for 200,000 years and we have never actually come to terms with what we are on this planet. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're doing so many stupid things. And that's why the world is like in some trouble, let's say.
Right.
It's our stupidity is catching up with us, and our neglect of ourselves is catching up with us. So I'm now going into that arena because that's actually the most important thing that needs to be done on the planet.
Yeah, and there's the common thread here with a lot of this is, and you called it basics. Can I paraphrase it or also refer to it as like first principles? Like how do you get down to, when you put a record on a record player, someone who thinks first principles says, what's actually happening? Oh, there's a needle moving up and down on a groove in a record.
I'm very much into first principles.
Perfect. So let's dive into, and I want to get to the broader spectrum of nature and the way we act as well. But I want to start with oils because I think that kind of will be a good analogy for what we're talking about more broadly. Mm-hmm. Help me understand oils from a first principles with regards to human health and kind of scientifically what's happening with oils in our body and in our overall function.
Okay, so the body is made out of food, water, and air. That's the building blocks. And out of food, there are 42 essential nutrients. And they're defined as nutrients that your body cannot make from anything else, but has to have to live and be healthy, and therefore has to get in from outside. Mm-hmm. So something else in nature makes those building blocks for us. The second part of the definition of essential is if you don't get enough of any of the 42 essential nutrients, you cannot stay healthy. Your health will deteriorate. They're really important because they're the building, the construction material, and the energy providing molecules. So your health will go down. You will get deficiency symptoms. They will get worse with time. And if you don't get enough long enough, you die. This is how important they are. And number 3, if your health is deteriorating because you're not getting enough of some essential nutrient, but before you die, you bring enough of it back into the diet, then all of the problems that come from not getting enough are reversed because life knows how to make the body work, provided we take responsibility here at our mouth to make sure that all of the building blocks it needs to make a body that works means health, that we make sure that all of the building blocks are provided in optimum quantities so life can make us optimum health, physical health, by constructing and turning over the body.
Okay, wonderful.
And then there's one more thing, is that for each one of these essential nutrients, researchers have to have established at least one biochemical reaction in which that nutrient is required and without which that reaction cannot take place in the body. So it's a very tight definition. That applies to 42 nutrients, 18 minerals, 13 vitamins, 9 essential amino acids that come from protein, and 2 essential fatty acids that come from oils.
Okay, cool. So basically there's 42 essential nutrients. We talk about the necessity of the body to intake this. I just want to diverge one point here. There is obviously the ability for the body to actually do what it needs to do. Totally get it. There is always the risk and threat of external, factors, right? So someone breaks their leg, right? That's problematic. Even despite all of this, people still develop, the type of affliction that traditional medicine or a doctor would look to treat, right? Someone can have the entire regime and eat the best things in the world and never do any of the wrong things and still develop some sort of condition that might be genetically disposed or whatever. So in doing this, it's not necessarily about completely expecting avoidance of all of the medical maladies, but largely about being able to say most of this stuff is avoidable if you take personal responsibility for what you're doing.
Yeah. What I'm talking about is the essential building blocks that you cannot be healthy without.
Right.
Okay. Now, on top of that, of course, if you fall off a tree and you break your leg, maybe it helps to have somebody said it. I'm not against the different modalities. I'm against medical profession calling what they do healthcare, because it's actually disease management, and it's symptom suppression, and it's crisis intervention. Obviously, there's a place for that, but it shouldn't be misrepresented. It should be called disease management. So, so that's my only issue with it. And then, you have toxins, and you have different things that are bad for you. Obviously, you should leave those out.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to bring in the essential nutrients. You want to leave out pesticides, plastics, pharmaceutical drugs, industrial chemicals, damaged food molecules. You want to leave those out, because when they get in the body, they interfere with the function of what's supposed to be going on in there. Right.
Got it.
So, and then same with radioactive metals and heavy metals like mercury and lead and aluminum and cadmium, so you want to avoid those. And then radioactive rays. So there's things to avoid, but I'm focused on what do you need to bring in? Because we're not even doing that well. That should be the first thing. You bring in the good stuff, and that'll help you get rid of some of the bad stuff, because it'll block out some of the bad stuff. But then you also want to make sure you want to clean up your environment and your social circles in your house, so that you don't have a bunch of toxic stuff that interferes as well.
Understood. So just getting back to oils for a second, I guess a lot of misinformation even now about oils. Now, you launched this range of oils, specifically, and I know the product is much broader than that now. But back in the late 70s, 80, right? Okay, there was a research in the late 70s.
1986, we came out with flaxseed oil.
Okay, so what do we misunderstand then and still now about oils in the mainstream?
Okay, so the mainstream has been making oils since sort of the late 1800s. So this may be over 120, 150 years ago. They began to make oils, and the mass production of oils began. They were never making oils with health in mind. And technically speaking, we ought to be doing everything with health in mind, or with peace in mind, or with love in mind, or whatever is the good thing. Right. We should be doing everything with the good thing in mind. Right. Well, they didn't do that. They did it more for mass production. They wanted long shelf life, because then the keepability is good, because essential fatty acids are actually quite sensitive to damage by light, oxygen, and heat. And they wanted big markets. And in order to get those big markets with a perishable product, they had to do certain kinds of processing. In particular, treated with sodium hydroxide, a very corrosive base, then treated with phosphoric acid, a very corrosive acid, then bleach it, because the light molecules, the color molecules in oils, absorb light, and then the light damages the oil molecules. So they took those out. When they did that, the oil went rancid and smelled bad. So now they had to blow off the rancidity, and they blow it off by boiling the oil. So they're heating the oil to frying temperature before it goes into a plastic bottle, which leaches into the oil, and before they put it on the shelf before you buy it. And by the way, they're also working with non-organic seeds. So they have pesticides in the oil. And part of the reason why they heat the oil to frying temperature is called deodorization, or molecular distillation, or wiped film evaporation. They do that high temperature process because they can get rid of half of the pesticides in the oil. Of course, I got poisoned by pesticides, so I was not impressed. Say, what do you mean? The other 50% stay in the oil? So I called the scientist at the American Oil Chemist Society. I said, when you know that this does damage, and by the way, it's about 0.5 to 1% of the molecules are damaged when this processing is done. So I said, well, when you know that does damage to the oil, why do you do it? And he said, well, one reason is we can get rid of half of the pesticides. I kept that one to myself, but I said to them, why don't you start with organically grown seeds? Then you have no pesticides to worry about. Super long silence at the end of the phone. And I waited. I mean, I love talking, but I also know how to shut up and listen.
Sit back.
Anyway, I waited. And when he got back to me, he was really angry. He just yelled. He says, I don't know what your problem is. The oil is 99% good, and it's only 1% damaged. And if you got 99% on an exam, you'd be damn happy, wouldn't you?
Right.
Well, I wasn't as impressed with the 99% because my pesticide spraying license I got 99.5%. And when I was in genetics, there were times when I got 100%. And the next best mark was 62%. And it's because I loved the topic. I was unbelievably in love with the topic. Right. And so I was really good at it because I was really paying attention, right? Anyway, so then I thought, but maybe I'm overreacting. He says, it's only 1%. So I asked the question. If I take a US tablespoon, which is 15 milliliters or 14 grams of oil, I have a tablespoon of oil that is 1% damaged, how many damaged molecules will be in that tablespoon? And I want to ask you that question.
I'm going to go with, it's going to be a larger number based on how you set it up. I'm going to go with 2 million.
2 million?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 million has how many zeros? 6, right?
6 zeros. 7 zeros. So 6 zeros. Yeah, six zeros. 2 and 6 zeros, yeah.
0. Yeah. Okay, so it's got 2 zeros. Would you like to know the actual number?
Sure.
It's a 6 followed by 19 zeros. So that means your guess is 13 zeros too short. Right. That means what that means is you have underestimated the damage you're doing to yourself when you use those oils by 1,000 million, billion, trillion, by 60 trillion times. No, by 30 trillion times.
Got it. Yeah.
It's 30. So you have underestimated how much damage you're doing to your body by 30 trillion times. So I say to people, listen, if you're going to get on an airplane, you're going to fly home for the holidays, and you're about to get on the plane, and somebody who only tells the truth says to you, oh, by the way, did you know that when you get on that airplane, your chance of crashing and dying is 30 trillion times higher than you thought it was? Would you get on the airplane?
Yeah.
Right? And of course, I was in Ireland. I said, I would canoe back to Canada. Right? Because I wouldn't get on the airplane. But we're doing that to ourselves. In your case, we're doing 30 trillion times more damage to ourselves than we think we're doing. Mm. Oh, well, it's only 1%. And then
1% arsenic would be a problem too, right?
and then how much? And then how many molecules is that? Well, it's more than 1 million damaged molecules that never exist in nature, that many of which life never made a method to break down or get rid of.
Yeah.
More than 1 million of those for every one of your body's 60 trillion cells.
Right. Yeah, it's not insignificant.
When I found that out, I said to myself, I can't get healthy on oils like that. We should make oils with health in mind. Right. And so then, because I'm a farm boy and I know how to tinker with stuff, I said, well, if it's light, oxygen, and heat are the problems that damage the good oils, then what we need to do is we need to develop a machinery for pressing oils that is very tight, so no light, no oxygen, and only low temperature get to the oil. While it's being pressed, while it's being settled, while it's being filtered, while it's being filled, then we put it in glass so we don't get plastic in the oil. And it's a dark bottle. Then we put the nitrogen on top. Everybody does that. Then we put it in a box to cut out the light so that the light doesn't damage the oil. You should freeze or refrigerate it in the factory. If we ship it to Australia or Asia or Europe, and it's in transit more than 2 weeks, it's shipped refrigerated. The store's refrigerated. We tell you to refrigerate it at home. And once you open the bottle, we tell you to use the oil within 8 weeks, because once you open it, oxygen gets in and then gradually the oil oxidizes. So we did something based on information that we got from the industry that makes the oils to say, we need to do something better than this. And by the way, more health problems come from damaged oil than any other part of nutrition, even more than sugar. And more health benefits come from making the oil change that your body needs from the damaged oils to oils made with health in mind. Now, there's a second thing that happened after I got poisoned and I had my head buried in the journals, which was that omega-6 was known to be an essential nutrient by 1929, and that was confirmed in 1968 through intravenous nutrition. Omega-3 got some attention, but there was a conflict between an omega-6 that sounds like an omega-3, a gamma-linolenic acid, and the omega-3, which is alpha-linolenic acid. And they're similar, they're just different in one, where one of the double bonds is. That one, we lowered our intake to 1/6 of what people got in 1850, while we doubled our intake of omega-6 in the past 100 years or so. Mm. So we've changed the ratio between the two. They're both essential. They're both converted into hundreds of different molecules in the body, both with important functions. And they use the same enzymes for that conversion. So the omega-3 6s are converted. The omega-3s are not converted because we don't have enough in our diet. Right. 99% of the population does not get enough omega-3s for optimum health. It is the single most widespread essential nutrient insufficiency, followed by magnesium at 80% and vitamin D probably at 80%, except in the middle of Australia. And you know, for those who run around naked, in the middle of Australia.
So 5-year-olds in the middle of Australia. Got it. I want to come back to one thing that you just said that and it's the other half of the science that you've just broken down, which is fascinating and amazing to understand in a little more detail from where I'm coming from. The thing that I'm also curious about is our relationship as a society with oils generally, and the idea that we need to consume them, right? I think most people, and I myself included, kind of get a sense that olive oil might be good for you, right? That's as far as we're down the oil journey with regards to oil might be useful. But the vast majority of people, I think, see oils as a way to stop stuff sticking to a pan or make fries taste good. But the suggestion here is that our relationship with oils is completely misconstrued. I want you to help me understand what our relationship as society with oils is and what it needs to be or should be from your perspective.
Well, the industry was interested in shelf life. And They were really interested in selling a lot of oil. So our parents and grandparents, my parents, your grandparents, let's put it that way,
okay,
were bamboozled by the oil industry. Start cooking with oil, because cooking used to mean with water.
Right.
And using oil was called frying or deep frying. When I was a kid, cooking did not mean using oil in food preparation. And in the traditional way that olive oil was used, and why it has a good reputation, it's not damaged. It's the only oil that is widely available that is not damaged by processing, because it's come from the flesh of the olive and it's made by a different process, floated off on water, and it's a fairly stable oil. But the way it was traditionally used, they didn't fry with it. What they did is they cooked in water, then they dumped the water off the veggies, then they added olive oil for flavor. Right. And olive oil, or any oil, enhances flavors of the foods it's put on. That's one of the reasons we like fats with food. And enhances the absorption of oil-soluble nutrients. So from that perspective, oil is good for health. Now, you can say, and people have told me, I've heard all the questions, right? Well, nature didn't make oil in bottles. So you really should never use bottled oil. You should use seeds and nuts, because there's oil in all whole foods. There's 0.1% in greens and fruit. And there's maybe 2 to 4 in grains. And there's maybe around 4 in lentils and beans. And then there's anywhere from 25 to 65% oil in seeds and nuts. Okay. Right. So we should just be eating in that way. And so I started thinking about it. It says, well, is optimum health actually nature's mandate? It's a good question, right? I mean, it's
absolutely.
The assumption is nature's perfect and its mandate is, So anyway, I started thinking about it and I said, well, maybe nature's mandate is not optimum health. Nature needs you to be healthy enough to grow up, to be healthy enough to reproduce, to be healthy enough to be around while the kids need you. And when your kids don't need you anymore, neither does nature. Then it's recycling time. And then it's recycling time, right? And that probably happens around age 45,
right?
Maybe 50, right?
I'm 45, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm ready for recycling.
And the reason why that makes sense from nature's point of view, if nature doesn't need you, the way you get recycled earlier is if you're never in optimum health.
Mm.
Okay? So then I did an experiment on myself. And we measure optimum oil take by how your skin feels. If your skin is dry, you need more oil because skin gets them last and loses them first. So I took seeds and nuts, flax for omega-3, sunflower and sesame for omega-6, in the ratio of twice as much omega-3 as omega-6. That's the ratio we work with in the blend. And I just ate the seeds themselves.
Mm.
I would eat, I think it was like 5 or 6 tablespoons of flax and then about 3 of sunflower and sesame. And I couldn't eat more than that because flax absorbs 6 times its volume of water.
All right.
So when you eat 6 tablespoons of flax, you got a meal, right? So, and I did that, and I was in California where it was warm. And in summer, you need less oil than in winter because in winter, quite a bit of oil is burnt to keep you warm.
Sure.
Even in summer in California, I could not keep my skin from drying out by eating the seeds that contain the oil, even though I had it in the same ratio. So I say there may be people who can get all the oil they need from seeds and nuts. I can't. So I recommend the seeds and nuts because they're good nutrition. But if your skin is dry or you need to put gunk on it, then take oil in addition and mix it in your food. Don't take it off a spoon. Mix it in your food. Spread the intake out over the course of the day and take as much extra from oil as you need to get your skin soft, smooth, and velvety. So amazing. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a bunch of research around that kind of essentially poo-poos, technical term, supplements and just says, well, you don't need to take supplements, you can just eat. But the argument is, well, if the supplements aren't able to supplant and replace where it's coming from in food, well, sure, you got a circular truth. But if you're actually addressing this in scientific terms to say, well, this is actually how much of this stuff you need, and you simply can't get it from eating this much food. They talk about turmeric, right? There's a big craze at the moment with turmeric lattes. I don't know if this is in California or in Europe or anywhere else in the world, but in Sydney at the moment, if you're sick, someone offers you a turmeric latte at a cafe, and the amount of turmeric you need to actually have any impact on your immune system is gargantuan. It's like 6 tablespoons, not dissimilar to your flax argument. And like the idea that
I'm not sure that's true. Any good molecule will have some benefit to you. I drink turmeric matcha lattes every day. I get them. I mix them both in the latte.
Perfect. But the point is still valid, right? Which is that if you're trying to get this thing from nature in a concentrated form to be able to perform a task, it's not to say you can't get it from nature and you shouldn't eat well. Absolutely, you should. But there is an opportunity to supplement. There is an opportunity to leverage science to say, well, it's infinitely easier to get the amount that your body needs by bypassing, the way nature produced this thing. I want to come back to something that you said before.
But let me straighten you out a little bit here.
Sure, please.
So it's not a matter of you should eat oils instead of seeds and nuts. You should base your food intake on whole foods, okay? Preferably organic, preferably raw, fresh, whole, raw, organic, as much as you can. Probably for humans, more plant-based than we tend to think. Because there was a time when the hunters only had rocks to hunt with and they came home without meat almost every day at that time. So then they ate plants because they don't run away and they don't fight back and they're easy to hunt down and kill, right? So get as much as you can from whole foods. And then if that's not enough, then supplement. Right. Supplement means in addition to, not instead of. Don't do oil instead of food. Do oil in addition to the oil you get in food.
Got it.
Okay.
Understood.
So and because it's it's why if you say, well, I just found out that there's multi-mineral, multivitamin supplements and I'm just not going to eat food anymore because I'm getting all my essential nutrients. People would look at you and say, you need your head examined. Right. And so always build the best possible food program that you can made out of fresh, whole, raw, organic, or as close to that as you can. And then if you can't get your skin from being dry, then add oil to it until your skin is soft, smooth, and velvety. So that's how we apply it.
Is there more, and you used skin as an example a couple of times, I'm assuming you're using the shorthand. What else is happening in the body what else is oil used in? I think you mentioned a couple of hundred different molecules are made from the oil as a byproduct of the oil coming in. What else is oil doing in the body?
Well, the essential fatty acids, they're part of the structure of the cell membranes.
Yeah.
That's the cell membranes. And then there are receptors on those cell membranes where things go in and out of cells. Well, the essential fatty acids improve the function of the cell receptor membranes. The cell receptor proteins, right?
Yeah.
And that means your hormones work more effectively at the cell receptor level. And whatever is happening to take wastes out and bring foods in, that'll happen more effectively. So that's one role they play. They increase in oxygen metabolism, oxygen consumption, oxidation rate, and energy production. In fact, some people call the omega-3 molecule the God molecule because it has the most energy. And when you give it to athletes, they do their sport to exhaustion. You give them a tablespoon, like a U.S. tablespoon, 15 milliliters. You guys, I think, have 20 milliliter tablespoons.
Okay.
In Australia, right?
Yeah. Or the rest of the world.
Yeah, and the rest of the world. 15 milliliter tablespoons, one per 50 pounds or 25 kilograms of body weight per day, mixed in food spread out over the course of the day. And if athletes did their sport to exhaustion before they started, and then 30 days after starting to do that, their increase in performance to exhaustion went up by 40 to 60%. That means they got tired slower. They had more energy before they got tired, so they got tired slower, and then they recovered from fatigue quicker. And we did that with marathon runners. We had them run their marathons on oil and carb deplete before they went on the run. When at that time, everybody was carb loading.
Right.
You can only load a pound of carbs, and they run out at mile 20, and you have 26 miles to go. So then they would hit the wall, and then they would drag their butts across the finish line. And we said, no, you're doing it wrong. You need to carb deplete. You need to make sure your body's tanked up with good oils. And you need to run the entire race on oils, because you can have 300 pounds of fat in your body, on which you, by the way, you could run 12,000 miles.
Right.
You can only run 20 miles on the carbs you load. So there's something wrong with even the conception of that. So a lot of people wouldn't follow us because that's not what the important people were all saying, because we were just little upstarts, right? There's a few people who followed us, and the feedback from them was, I ran the whole race on oil. I carb depleted. And when I had finished the marathon, I felt like I had enough energy to run another one.
Right. Should have gone harder.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to ask a question that you've kind of segued into quite nicely. That's curious. Is I want to, you've been on this arc of this understanding of oils, and I want to go into the broader picture in a minute. But just before we leave oils, how is kind of our understanding and your understanding, or the scientific community's understanding of oils and our nutrition still evolving? Like, is this still a bit of a moving picture? Is the science kind of settled? Like, where are we at with this?
Well, I'm pretty small. We're pretty small. I mean, we're in 40 countries, but small scale. A lot of people don't pay attention, and a lot of people just read the ads and do what the ad says. And the ad didn't come from science. The ad came from marketing, right? And so slowly people are getting a little more suspicious. I think in the past few years, a lot more suspicious.
Sure.
And I think that's going to be good for alternative methods of dealing with health issues. So there's that part. Then the oil industry has never changed what they do because the money's still coming in. There's $100 billion industry annually. The scientific community, they won't talk about the damage done by processing to the oils because they get their grants from the oil industry. And so they don't talk about it. So it's never made the news. I got close once, and then the TV station didn't play it.
Right.
Because they were getting ads. They were making money on ads from Western Oil, which was a refined oil. that's been damaged by processing to 1%, like we talked about, right?
Yeah.
So that's never made the news. So we're sort of kind of still sitting there. And there's a lot of people who've gotten the idea that oils are bad for you. And they talk about don't use seed oils and don't use omega-6s. And right now there's a lot of them. But all the 40 plus years that I've been working on, there's always been somebody who said you don't need oils. There was even a guy who said, if you get enough B vitamins, you don't need essential fatty acids. And there were about 30,000 research studies that said he's wrong.
Right.
But you have free speech. And that's the downside of free speech. You get to say what you want, right?
Of course.
And so these people that believe this guy or that, have found out, there's some problems associated to oils. What they have done, what they didn't do that we did, they get the research is done on damaged oils. So whatever damage comes on studies with oils, is that damage from the omega-6s in the oil, or is that damage done by the damaged molecules?
Right.
Because of processing and frying. Frying is the worst thing we ever invented to do because it damages the oil big time by light, oxygen, heat, all at the same time. So these people who write these books, basically they're right in the sense that there's problems with those oils because they're not made with health in mind. But they're wrong because they're blaming the oil and when they should be blaming the damage done by processing. And they haven't looked deep enough to do that. And that's like it's a little bit irritating, We did homework. We really looked deeply into it over 40 years ago. And then all these little upstarts come and they tell me something that absolutely is wrong.
Right.
Omega-6 is just as essential as omega-3. But oils need to be made with health in mind if you want them to support your health.
And is the corollary here that you also need to consume them with health in mind? Like,
what's that?
Yeah, if you just grab your beautiful oil, take it out of the fridge and fry with it, then you're all
No. So we set standards. You keep it refrigerated. You put it in brown glass bottles. You make it organic. It's in glass. Yeah. The ratio between the two has to be right. So we use twice as much omega-3 as omega-6 because omega-3s are way too low and omega-6 is high. We put omega-6s in because we want the omega-6s also made with health in mind because the ones that most people are using are damaged. So I would say to people, get off those. Your body needs an oil change from damaged oil to oils made with health in mind. And then when you do that, you use those oils, you put them in food after the food comes off the heat. You don't use it for frying. You could put it on pasta sauce, hot pasta sauce. You can put it on steamed veggies. That's okay. You put it on before you eat it. You don't let it sit around forever. You do not ever, ever, ever fry it with an oil that is made with health in mind because frying is a process made with killing you in mind. Right. Now they didn't say how can we kill them. They may have said, oh, it's more convenient and it's faster. That's how they sold our parents on it. And our parents, grew up in a time when they said, oh, the industry would never do anything that wasn't good for us. They were very, very naive, very trusting in those days. Not these days so much, but so you never use the oil for frying. Oils made with health. And if you fry an oil that's rich in omega-3 and omega-6, it will become more toxic than if you use an olive oil or a saturated fat for frying. But they will still cause damage because they burn the food and you burn the oil and you change the molecules. And it's not good for you. You increase inflammation and you increase the risk of cancer.
So there isn't, I know we're at a bit of a tangent and we're quite deep in the weeds, which I love. But so just if you take the counterweight to get this good oil and get it into you and all of the stuff we've just spoken about, but then on the flip side, you pull out a fry pan and fry a bunch of food, or fry a bit of chicken and then put it into a chicken salad and add your oil at the end. Are you suggesting that they just don't fry the food? Is there a better way to cook food that doesn't involve frying, I guess is my question.
We used to cook in water. But even in water, like if you look at nature, again, it's always like, how was it in nature before we got civilized? Every creature that eats its food fresh, whole, raw, organic. That's the standard. That's nature's standard for health. That's life's standard for health. We cook, and there's a reason for it because of pollution and because we're dirty and, we get unfriendly microorganisms, so we kill them by cooking. But cooking already does some damage to the food because you destroy some of the more sensitive vitamins partially. You lose some minerals into the cooking water. So you do some damage. You destroy all of the enzymes that are in raw food that do 60% of the digestion of the food for you. You kill any probiotics that are on the food like they would be in nature. So you've already made changes. So when you do that, you should replace the enzymes and the probiotics that were destroyed. You might want to drink the cooking water. We used to do that when I was a kid. So you get your minerals back, right? But you still lose a little bit. And when you fry, it's just way more intense to do that. So wherever you are, if you're frying right now, then go back to cooking in water. And then slide out of cooking in water and eat as much raw as you can because your body was made for that. And in the raw foods, if you cook foods, you destroy the enzymes that are in the raw food. They do 60% of the digestion for you before your food even drops into your stomach, into the acid. And if you cook the food and destroy those enzymes, then you're actually more than doubling your digestive load for digestion. And your body was made for that. So that'll catch up with you. And then your immune system has to get involved. And when your immune system has to get involved in digestion, it's not free to go after the other jobs it needs to do, which is go after viruses, funguses, bacteria, cancer cells, inflammatory proteins, cell debris, cell turnover, repair, all of that. So then you're actually hurting yourself. And so we say replace the enzymes and probiotics that you destroyed when the foods were cooked.
Understood. All right, let's get broader. So we're at oils and your journey, but also, the company's journey is to go beyond oils as one of these three pillars. And you take these first principles. How did you apply this to these other areas? And let's talk about those other areas for a few minutes.
Well, so what the principle is, we live in a world, we know, the media will tell you everything that's wrong anywhere, and they never tell you what's right. When it comes to health, the medical profession says health is when you're not sick. No, it's not. Health, there are principles and components of health. If you bring in those components and you follow those principles, life knows how to make your body healthy. So what the medical profession said, and they told me that, I said, when I did the medical entrance exam, I was really high in comprehensive and analytical, like really high, 98th percentile among college graduates, right? Like I'd be a smart kid, maybe a smart ass kid, right? So,
or both,
right? But then when it came to general knowledge, I was 66. When it came to history, I was 23rd percentile because I've never been interested in history that much. Even though they say if you don't study history, you're bound to repeat it. No, if you study history, you're bound to normalize all the crazy things that people have done over history. So that's really not a good idea. So I'm always saying, okay, well, what is true? In math, you say what is 2 plus 2? You have one right answer and you have infinite minus one wrong answers.
Right.
So why don't we go for the right answer? If you know that it's 2, then you know that every other answer somebody might come up with is wrong. Why don't we do that with health? Why don't we do that with peace? Why don't we do that with love? Why don't we do that with whatever it is that is true for us about human beings, about nature, about social groups, about cell function? What is right? What does it look like when it's right? I learned more about what's right in biochemistry and genetics than I learned in medicine. Because in medicine, we only study what's wrong. And we don't even have a definition of what's right. Even the UN definition of health, complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not just the absence of disease and infirmity. That's their definition. You know what they leave out? Physical, mental, and social. They leave out awareness, which is an inner thing. They leave out life energy, which is unconditional, empowering love. They leave out inspiration, although you could kind of sneak that into mental.
Right.
Then they do the body. Then we do survival smarts. That's the other part of mind. Then they do social. They even leave out the environment in that definition. Right. But they all affect health. And then, of course, the other one is your your acceptance of living in a terminal body in an infinite universe, and whatever that's about in terms of philosophy or religion or acknowledgement of the greater awareness, the infinite awareness, right? That's not in the definition. So even the UN, they went a ways towards it, right? But then they also don't spell out what does it mean, complete physical health. What does complete physical health involve? And then if you're talking about the 42 essential nutrients and digestion, enzymes, probiotics, fiber, bitters, and then you're talking about fitness and rest and recovery and healing, so that, they don't spell it out. It all sounds very good. They have a nice definition. But when it comes down to it, is that most of those people are bureaucrats that are not very practical. And then they give advice that comes out of theory that doesn't work on the ground.
Right.
So, and I could go more into that because I've been on the ground a lot and I've never been in the United Nations.
I do want to translate it to kind of the specifics of where Udo's Oils is going beyond oils to actually go into these other pillars. And I think, fortunately for your life's work and probably for people that follow you and as in come after you, not follow you specifically, there is an infinite amount of time that could be spent on this. To your point, we are contemplating the infinite nature of the universe and our own mortality is probably something we'll get a few millennia out of, if not more. But in the near term,
I can do it in 1 week. I can do it on 1 week, but I've been at it for, I'm 81, so I've been at it since I was 2 years old, because that's when I woke up to that not everything was perfect, right?
Sure.
And then the question was, what would it take for it to be perfect? So that's what I've dedicated my life to.
Sure.
But I can't make that happen for you, but I can be an influence in that direction. I would like to have this conversation with 8 billion people. We work with people in jails who were there because they did some really bad things. And you listen to their stories. They never heard, they had guns and they had violence and they had abuse and they had all kinds of stuff. And they never got anything that was like inspiring about the beauty of nature and the beauty of life and the beauty of themselves, that they could anchor their mind, which sets direction for what you do and sets limits for what you won't do, right? They don't even have that to go on to build a direction in their life for. And then you give them this direction. I have a teacher who does that. And some of these guys, they may be in there for life and they get completely transformed and they become human beings that you actually could be friends with, right? So that story needs to be told so that people can say, do I want this or don't I want this? Do I like it the way it is, even though I see things are getting worse and worse, just like they did before the Second World War, which would not have happened if people had practiced peace between the end of the first and the start of the second, but they never practiced peace. And now we had the end of the Second War 80 years ago. We never practiced peace. What we did is we did arms and we, so much energy. We gave in Canada $9.5 billion to the Ukraine for the war. And we spent 0 cents for peace at home.
Right.
And peace is the principle. Yeah. Talk about first principles. Peace is the principle because the entire universe unfolds in peace. And that peace is not affected by anything that happens in it. Galaxy explodes, that peace is not, it's like space, right? Space is not affected when a galaxy explodes. Space is a space. It just happens in space. Well, peace is like that. And it's everywhere. It's always been everywhere. There's been peace everywhere forever. And everywhere will be forever. But only peace in us recognizes that. And so we have to go into stillness. We have to go into the core of our own being. And that peace, when we feel that peace, we see that we are a center point for it. Each one of us is a center point for a peace that has its center in our being and goes out to infinity, not limited by anything to do with the body or the mind.
Right. Well, I want to try and place this in context because while you were speaking then, and, I was thinking about kind of the map from oils to a form inner peace. Let's talk about inner peace, right? the thing that kind of struck out to me, because and I'm thinking in terms of systems and framework, and most often on this show we think about systems as this kind of external function of there is a system out there that operates, and it is the health system or an energy system or jail system, whatever that system is, and an innovator has come in and rethought the way that system works. But transforming from just talking about oils as that external system and starting to think of this as a system of an individual human, my mental model goes to some form of framework to try to couch that in some almost visual term. And what I'm thinking about is kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but in this case, Udo's hierarchy of needs. Help me understand oils through to the top one and that hierarchy and how that plays out.
Yeah. Okay, not a hierarchy. I started there because I got poisoned by pesticides, so I had to. That kind of dragged me into it. And then the next thing was, well, what else affects health that is being neglected? So the second thing was digestion. That's how I got into digestive enzymes, probiotics, fiber, bitters, right? And then when I did that, and I said, okay, well, what else is really important that isn't being addressed? Oh, well, greens. Greens are the foundation of everything in physical health. Everybody knows they should be eating their greens, and hardly anybody does. So I put some energy into that. And then one day, and there were other things, minerals and vitamins and carbs, and, so there are other topics, but people were addressing those. I wanted to address what wasn't being addressed. I'm kind of like that.
Yeah.
I don't come in at the end and say, oh yeah, I want one of those too. I'm usually at the beginning. I was 20 years ahead of my time on the oils thing. And stuff that's coming out in science now, I was predicting just from understanding oils and just from the relationship I had with the field, which was one of, admiration, appreciation, ecstasy, mystical experiences almost.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And so then I'm sitting down and saying, okay, well, what else affects health? And it just bombed me, right? Oh, everything affects health. Oh my God, everything affects health. Well, what is everything? Human nature affects health. Nature affects health. We know people affect health. When we were kids and we would, somebody would shin hack us on the soccer field, and it hurt like hell, right? Yeah. And we'd get really mad and we'd scream at the other kid, you didn't make me sick. Even as kids, we knew that other people affect our health.
Okay.
Right? So, and then I started looking at human nature. And by the way, this came from, my track was always the bigger track because I came out of the war and I was always wanting to know how could human beings live in harmony with themselves, live in harmony with each other, live in harmony with nature. And so that was there as a track for me. And that's what drove my science. So it's almost like the oils were a sidetrack for me, just because I had a problem to deal with, right? So when I was 30, I left university because I was missing something. I didn't get it in biology. Biology is a study of life. We never, ever got life in biology. We studied form and function. We did not study life. Life is an energy. So after I left, I actually went into all the various scriptures and the teachings of the masters. And how I think of it now is that those masters were all teachers of human nature. So I would be talking about Socrates and Christ and Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Huang Po. There's a whole bunch of them. And I liked reading their stuff because it gave me insights into how human nature works. Nobody studies human nature. In psychology, you don't study human nature. You don't study soul either, because psychology means study of soul. You study thoughts, beliefs, emotions, no soul, right? In medicine, you don't study health. You study disease. So there's always this central piece that never came out of formal education. So I started chasing that. And at one point, I chased it with psychedelics for a short time.
I was actually going to ask that.
Yeah. And I had an LSD experience that kind of blew the door off my war baby personality.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh my God, and I laughed and cried. And it was like what struck me as really funny. I was rolling on the floor, laughing to Mozart music and crying at the same time. And it wasn't like I was sad. It just blew me as the funniest thing I'd ever experienced. That everything that I was looking for so studiously on the outside was all inside of me.
Mm.
That was a super eye opener. But I did that for a short time. And then I said, okay, no more psychedelics. They're hard on your body. Then I got into the scriptures. Then I went in with a Christian group. And the idea was, I got the red letter edition of the Bible. You know what that is?
I don't know what that is.
Okay. Everything Jesus says is in red ink. Okay. And everything else is in black ink. So my thought was, well, if I want to model myself after somebody, the masters seem to be like the most likely that I would want to model myself after. So in my culture, it's Jesus. So I got the red letter edition. Everything he says is in red. I would read it. I would think about what does that mean? Or what could that mean? I would put it to the test. And then I'd have these really interesting experiences. Magical. They'd like things that you wouldn't expect to happen. And that was cool. And then this group of Christians came up the coast from California to Vancouver, and they called themselves the Jesus People's Army. That should have been a warning because I was a war baby. Army was not a good term, but I missed the cue. And I missed the cue because I thought, oh yeah, these guys must be trying to figure out, just like I am. Right. And so we're all going to get together and we're all going to share our stories of our adventures in the search. And we're all going to leave the evening enriched. Right? Makes sense? Sure. So, decided to go visit them. They had a coffee house, and I walked into the coffee house, sat down at a table, and this guy instantly swooped next to me into a chair. That should have been my second cue, and I missed that one too.
Sure.
So I sat there, I looked at him, I didn't introduce myself, I just looked at him and I said, it must be possible to see God and live. Because when we were kids, we were told, if you see God, he kills you. I was like, why? He loved me unconditionally. He runs my life. He gives everything. He brings everything. And I look at him, he kills me. It's like, doesn't compute, right? So I said, it must be possible to see God and live. Well, he jumped out of the chair and he was jumping around the room, flailing his arms wildly and screamed at the top of his lungs, you're from the devil. You're from the Antichrist. Get out. Holy smokes. I go slinking out of there. I'm standing on the sidewalk and I'm saying, well, okay, gee, I haven't seen God. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And I'm a little kid inside, It's like I got really confused and really desperate. And there was this thing is, whatever that question is, I really want to know. It was so strong. I really want to know. And I decided to go in nature to clear my head. That's how I used to clear my head when things got too much for me. So I went to a beach, completely deserted, and there was all the logs on the beach, and somebody had draped plastic over the logs. And it was a little dwelling, and I said, okay, here's my hotel for the weekend. So I went down, I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke bolt upright from dead asleep, and there was a being made of light. No label, no words, just a being, just a presence, right? Couldn't tell if it was male or female. Couldn't tell if it was old or young. Didn't have wings, so it wasn't an angel. This is how I thought about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it embodied a message. And I could put words to the message, and the message was, I am come not to judge, but to love, which was a nice answer to my loving Christian friends that booted me out, but I am come not to judge, but to love. And actually, I had wanted, when I started doing the red letter edition, my question was, I want to know what Jesus felt that made him able to do what he did, live like he did, say what he did. Because I knew that if you write poetry, you have to be feeling something. I wanted to know what that feeling was. And that's when I got that feeling. I am come not to judge, but to love. Now, it turns out when you think about it, your life, and I'm talking about the energy that runs you, that when it separates from your body gets recycled. That energy, life energy, what is that? Well, life energy is solar energy. You are a solar energy gadget. So is every other human being. So is every tree and every animal, pretty much, and pretty much every microbe, right? Because the sun shines and it's 15 million degrees Celsius at the center of the sun. So you don't want to get that close, right?
Sure.
So the radiation is filtered through 93 million miles of space. Then it's filtered through Earth's atmosphere. Then it's filtered through molecules in plants. And then what remains, the solar energy fraction that remains, is stored in bonds between atoms to make molecules.
Right.
Then you eat those molecules as food, and then they're absorbed, and in your cells, those bonds are broken, and that energy is released, and now it's called life. So when somebody says, you are my sunshine, you're only wrong about the ma, because you are sunshine, it's not my sunshine, right?
That was a very interesting tangent.
Yeah. So yeah, just a small fact, right? So that energy it weighs nothing, and it runs everything. It's the power. It's the power that runs everything, right? Weighs nothing, runs everything, and that energy is the master in your body. It is omnipresent in your body, omnipotent in your body, and omniscient in your body. By the way, that's a definition of God, on a description of God, right? And in the East, they talk about God, men, people who are in touch with that energy. I have another question for you. If I say to you, hey, whose body is that? What's your answer?
I don't know. I'm going to probably revert to Carl Sagan. We're all just stardust. That's where I'm going to go with.
Oh, no. You're way too complicated.
I think it's my body.
Okay,
I mean, my 5-year-old this morning said it's my body.
I was going to say, everybody except you would just say it's my body.
Yeah, it's my body. I mean, I was trying to work.
So if you say that's your body, you know what you've just told me? You've just told me you are not the body.
Right.
If that's your body, you're the owner of the body.
Right.
So now who owns the body? So who owns the body? Who is the me? Who is the me that owns the body? Well, it's life. Life owns and operates the body. It's the CEO. It's the benevolent dictator. It's the king of the body. You know, it's the master of the body, right? So you are actually, in your individual essence, are that energy, are that master, are that life energy. That's your essential nature. Now, then the question is, well, how well do you know yourself as owner of your body? And most people would say, well, not too much, not very well. Why not? Because you're always going out with your focus. Ever since you were born, you went out with your focus. You hardly ever spend any time sitting down, shutting up, getting quiet, and bringing your focus back inside into the energy that fills the space your body occupies. But when you do that, you end up feeling that love, and you feel so cared for, and you feel so loved that all of a sudden it isn't about you anymore. You know, it's not like when I was a kid, it was always like, what can I do that'll get me taken care of? And I wouldn't do things that needed to be done if I couldn't see how they would take care of me, right? Now, it's like, okay, I'm taken care of. And if I don't feel cared for, I know where to go to feel cared for, because every time I go there, it's there. I feel it.
Right.
Okay, well, what's left to do? Nothing, except where can I help? What needs to be done? How can I make the biggest splash for good that's possible in the time I have?
I want to understand something at a practical level. Sorry.
Yeah, and just to finish that, and there's the life that we never got in biology. We got to find it in ourselves, because we killed all the creatures we did biology on.
Right.
We got it live. We got it live here, and we don't have to kill it to get to know it.
Right. I'm curious. There's a couple of things here. I'm interested in, because you've kind of cut right to where your understanding now is of this truth, this, of this knowledge, I guess. I'm not sure if knowledge is the right word, but innate knowledge may be a better description. Like, the only clue you've given me as to how you got to this point is the journey you went on in terms of reading a bunch of things from people you have collectively grouped as the masters, some experience with, in your particular faith, a Christian faith. I'm curious to know where you're at with that faith, just as a side note. But I'm also interested, what else have you been doing over the last 20 or 30 years that enabled you to arrive at this level of thinking or this way of thinking?
So the story I told you about the being made of light, that happened in 1970.
Yeah. Right.
So 1970, and then I was blown away. I mean, I've never had a question about what was the central message of the masters. Any of them, Buddha, Krishna, they all had similar message. Realized that not only is that the message of the masters to humanity, I am come not to judge but to love, but it's also the message of life to your body, and every life of every body, every life of every creature to its body. Okay. I only realized that recently. So I'm still cooking on that one experience I had. Okay.
Right.
And then after a while, it started to become more of a memory. It was a blast experience. But then it started to become a memory. And I was like, damn it, I want to live in that presence on a moment-to-moment basis. Well, how do you do that? And I started asking that question. And I said, I'm trying to figure it out. I need to find someone who can show me a step here because I don't know how to get there. And I then ran into someone who showed me a way to bring the focus inside and recommended that I practice it every day. And I thought it was too simple. And he was young. He was younger than I was. And I thought, I'm 30. I've been around. What's a 14-year-old going to teach me, right? And then I thought this method was too simple. But I argued with my ex-wife every day. I would just say one sentence and an argument would start. And I would get so frustrated. And it was like, I'm going to belt her or I got to leave the house. And I would leave the house, sit down on a log and practice this technique for 5 or 10 minutes because I couldn't sit still for an hour. That's what he recommended. And I noticed that if I did that, and then I would look at it and say, we argued about that. That was so trivial. That was so trivial. Just like in the Germans, who argued about trivial things. I said, man, there's got to be a better way than this. I was doing the same thing. And so then I realized that if I did the practice before the argument, I wouldn't rise to the bait. So 6 months, by the time 6 months were up, I said, this works. So I've been doing it now for over 50 years. I do it every day. I take time for stillness practice to bring focus inside and feel what it feels like to be alive. And that's how I got better at feeling loved and feeling content. And then behind the love is one more thing, which is the container or the awareness or the field or the space out of which everything evolves in the universe, including me. And that foundation or that container is an infinite container, and its most obvious attribute is peace. And you can you see peace everywhere once you find it in yourself. You can't see it if if peace in you is not looking, then you won't see the peace outside. And then you'll see all the things that are going wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I'm talking first principles, right? You like that term. I like that term. First principle is your existence has a foundation of all-encompassing peace out of which not only you, but every creature on this planet and every galaxy and everything comes. And is it incredible? That's where you're going to go when your body craps out. But isn't it incredible to be able to live feeling that and feeling loved and feeling inspired because of those first principles, and then doing what you can to make a difference in the world? When people say I'm looking for purpose, no, stop looking for purpose. Sit down, shut up, get quiet, drop into the love, drop into the peace, and your purpose is right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
will
then
present itself.
and then when the hero finds his purpose and the treasure and takes it back to the community, it is always based on love.
I think I've got one closing question for this because it's kind of rounded us out beautifully. I started right up front by asking you your age, which you offered as 82. It sounds like you're turning 82. Easily
82.
the most sprightly 82-year-old I've had the pleasure of talking to in any level of depth, which is probably more on me, but also a wonderful reflection. We do have a finite amount of time, and you're in this place now where you understand this about yourself and know this about yourself. What do you want to do with the rest of this time? Not
The rest
here,
of the
but
time I
overseas.
have. The rest of the time
Yeah.
Well, everything I've done still can continue. And it's basic to broaden it, right? 8 billion people should be getting oils made with health in mind. How am I going to get there? I don't have the faintest idea, right?
Right.
Just dancing as fast as I can, basically, right? But more than, and it's because that's what's changed in the world. There's so much more conflict, so much more distrust, so much more confusion, so many more people looking for something better that's not coming from the systems we've created and how they're working. The most important thing that needs to be done on this planet, and it's like 200,000 years overdue, because we've never done it ever since we've been on the planet, is to become independent. And I don't mean independent of the crown or independent of the government or independent of the conservatives or the liberals or the socialists, but to become independent, which is in-dependent, to become dependent on what is within us, because the leader that we're looking for to make the world a good place for everybody, that leader, that same leader, lives in every human being on the planet. And that leader is called life. And that leader is the master. And it is the master like the masters were. That same wisdom is in every human being. Okay? So what is the goal then? If 8 billion people live the life of the master, and I'm not talking about making religions, because the master didn't make the religions. The masters taught human nature to other people who were interested, whose heart ached. Heartache is the call to mastery. Heartache is the call to come home to being fully present in all of your being. And lots of people have heartache. It's triggered by lots of different things, but it's actually the call to come home. And we were home in the mother's womb because there was nothing to do and nowhere to go, and everything was provided, and it was safe, and we didn't know we had a mother, and we had no language, and we had no culture, and we didn't even need to breathe, right? And so we're just floating. I call it the Buddha tank. We were floating in the Buddha tank. So where was our focus? Our focus was at rest, inside, in its source, in life, and behind that, in awareness. And so we were in deep meditation for those 9 months or however long we spent there. So we know the experience. We've been there. This is not like new experience, right? And when you start doing a deep practice, you recognize it. It's like, it's not foreign. It's not different once you get out of your head, right? Then we came out. We had to get to know the world. So our focus went out into the world. That's for survival. Of course, ultimately we don't survive, but that's a whole other story, right? So we get to know the world, and our focus went from present inside, absent outside, gradually went to present outside, absent inside. And when we got disconnected from ourselves, that's where heartache began. That heartache is now triggered by lots of other things when our distractions end, because we hope to find it in our distractions and it's not there. And then it throws us back to ourselves, and it's a huge gift. It's like thirst for water, hunger for food. The ache of the heart, or thirst of the heart, or heartache, or the uneasy feeling, or loss, or emptiness, or restlessness, or whatever we call it, sorrow, sadness, whatever we call this feeling. It takes us out of our head, makes us simple, grounds us, and gets us this close to our wholeness, because our wholeness is just behind that. So what I say to people, when you feel heartache, don't distract yourself from it. Don't judge it. Just sit with heartache. Sit with feeling. Accept it. Don't judge it. Acknowledge it. embrace it. Be grateful for it because it's got you that close to home. And then slip behind it, and that's when you're home. And that takes practice because we've learned to focus, go out there and look at that, listen to that. So we do that really well because we've become really good at it because we do it every day. Mm-hmm. This has to be deliberate. It's not automatic. This is going out. It's automatic. This has to be deliberate. We need to make the time to do that. What if 8 billion people on the planet were able to sit down and connect to that peace and connect to that love that is their nature? This is not something we create. What if 8 billion people did that? Do you think this world would be different? Do you think we could actually create a world that works for everybody at the expense of nobody? Yeah, because
sounds like it's a very, very clear what you want to do with the time you have remaining. Sounds quite clear what you want to do with the time you have remaining.
Yeah.
The food is a pathway to ultimately helping more people be self-aware is too narrow a word, but to get this close to this life and to this being.
Yeah. What else is there to do? What else is there that's really important? What else is there that will fix the problems we're creating because we're not living like that? Mm. So wonderful. It's kind of, it's honestly, I have the best life. I have the best life. And what a journey. What a journey.
Well, we started off on shaping the system with oils. We've landed in a place where we're talking about shaping the system for ourselves and ultimately the ultimate meta to shape the system for everyone. So not to put our name into that three times, but
because
was
now,
an arc of the story.
Because I can only change it for myself because I only have access to myself, but I can be an influence in that direction for other people.
Wonderful.
And that's what I want to do.
Udo, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure, but also the best of rabbit holes and the greatest of depths we went into. So I was really stoked to talk to you, and I hope you enjoyed the experience as well.
Thank you for being patient for all our technical glitches, and thank you for doing it because you're an amplifier for the message that I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.